You stand on the ancient, windswept coast, the gentle sigh of the ocean a lullaby against the cliffs. Imagine the small fishing boats bobbing in the harbor, the distant laughter of children, the scent of peat fires warming cozy cottages. This was life for generations in many coastal villages, a rhythm dictated by the tides and the seasons. But sometimes the earth stirs, and the sea awakens with a different, terrifying voice. We journey now to an unusual kind of history, a history whispered by the waves. We will explore the forgotten communities that simply vanished after one night, erased by the furious hand of a single monumental storm. No trace remained, only silence where bustling homes once stood. Prepare to drift into the quiet echo of these lost worlds. You awaken not to the sharp clang of an alarm, but to the rhythmic cry of gulls circling overhead. The air, though crisp, carries the faint, comforting scent of drying salt and wood smoke. Through the small, leaded window of your cottage, you can just make out the first tentative streaks of dawn painting the eastern sky a pale rose and violet. It is still early, barely past 4 o'clock, but the village is already stirring. Life here begins with the sun and often long before it. You pull on your heavy woolen jerkin, feeling the familiar coarseness against your skin. A deep breath fills your lungs with the cool, briny air. Your boots thud softly on the packed earth path as you step outside. The cobblestones are slick with dew. Along the narrow lanes, other figures are also emerging, their movements practiced and economical. There is a quiet industry to these mornings, a shared understanding that the day's work must begin. You hear the distant creak of oars as the first few boats push off from the shore, dark silhouettes against the merging gray of sky and sea. Their lamps, like scattered stars, bob gently on the water. These are the hardy souls who fish the deeper, more unpredictable waters. You watch them go, a silent prayer perhaps forming on your lips for their safe return. Your own tasks are closer to home. The village itself is a patchwork of thatched roofs and whitewashed stone, clustered tightly for warmth and camaraderie against the vastness of the sea. Small gardens are tucked into every available patch of land, growing hardy vegetables that can withstand the salt spray and relentless winds. You can hear the lowing of a cow, the bleating of a few sheep kept in a nearby paddock, the distant crow of a rooster. Life is simple yet profoundly interconnected. You walk towards the small quay where the smaller fishing boats are being readied. The air fills with the smell of fresh fish, of tar and rope. Men with calloused hands mend nets, their fingers flying over the knots with an almost unconscious speed. Women gather shellfish from the exposed sands at low tide, their baskets filling with mussels and cockles. Children, still sleepy-eyed, chase each other along the shoreline, their laughter carried on the breeze. This is your world. This is home. For generations, your family has lived here, etching out an existence between the generosity and the immense power of the ocean. You know the tides, the currents, the shifting moods of the sea as intimately as you know your own reflection. You can read the sky for signs of fair weather or brewing squalls. It is a knowledge passed down through generations, woven into the very fabric of your being. The rhythm of life is slow, deliberate, and deeply tied to the natural world. Days are marked by the rising and setting of the sun, the ebb and flow of the tide, the changing seasons. Spring brings new life, summer offers abundance, autumn harvest, and winter, a time for mending, for stories by the fire, for weathering the storms that are a natural part of the year. You have seen many winters, felt the bite of the northerly winds, huddled with your neighbors when the waves crashed against the sea wall with unusual ferocity. But those are just storms, you tell yourself. They pass. The sun always returns. The sea always calms. This year the harvest was good. The fishing has been bountiful. There is enough food stored away for the colder months. The community is strong, bound by shared labor, shared joys, and shared hardships. You know every face, every story, every triumph and sorrow within these tight-knit walls. Your days are filled with purpose. Perhaps you are a fisherman, casting your lines into the gray-green expanse, hoping for a good catch to feed your family and sell at market. Perhaps you are a farmer, tending a small patch of potatoes and hardy grains, constantly battling the salty soil. Perhaps you mend nets or build boats or tend to the sick, or teach the children their letters in the small drafty schoolhouse. Whatever your role, it is essential, a vital thread in the strong tapestry of village life. Evenings bring a different kind of warmth. Fires glow in hearths, sending plumes of peat smoke curling into the twilight sky. The scent of cooking stew fills the air. Families gather, sharing the day's news, telling old stories, singing songs that have echoed through these halls for centuries. There is a deep, quiet contentment that settles over the village as darkness falls. The stars emerge, countless pinpricks of light in the vast, inky blackness above, reflected in the gentle swell of the ocean. You sleep soundly, lulled by the distant murmur of the waves, a sound that has always been a part of your life, a constant companion. It is the sound of home, of continuity, of the world as it has always been and always will be. Or so you believe. There is a certain resilience to the people who choose to live on the very edge of the land, where the solid earth meets the untamed sea. They are hardy, pragmatic, and deeply connected to their environment. They respect the sea, but they also trust in their own ability to navigate its whims. They have built their homes, their lives, and their futures on this very ground generation after generation. You watch the children play, building sandcastles that will inevitably be washed away by the tide, learning lessons about the transient nature of things without fully understanding their profound implications. They are growing up with the same deep connection to this place, the same inherent understanding of its rhythms and its dangers. The sea is their playground, their larder, their horizon. Consider the houses themselves. Not grand structures but solid, humble dwellings, built to withstand the constant buffeting of the wind and the occasional spray of the highest waves. Thick stone walls, sturdy timbers, roofs weighted down against the gales. Each house a testament to a long history of human persistence against the elements. Yet even the stoutest walls have their limits. You might find yourself walking along the low cliffs that define the village's boundary, gazing out at the endless expanse of the ocean. On a calm day, it is a magnificent, tranquil vista, stretching to an horizon where sky and water merge seamlessly. The air is clean, invigorating. You can feel the power of the natural world, a power that feels benign on days like these. A power that provides the fish in your nets, the seaweed for your fields, the very air you breathe. But there is always a whisper, a subtle undertone to the sea's song, a reminder of its untamed nature. A memory of old tales of storms that swallowed ships whole, of waves that dared to climb over the highest cliffs. These are just stories though, campfire warnings, cautionary tales to impress upon the young the respect due to the ocean. Not actual threats to your established, stable world. Not here. Not now. You watch the fishermen return, their boats heavy with the day's catch, their faces weathered but content. The bounty of the sea is shared, sold, prepared. Life is good. It is a harsh life, yes, demanding and relentless, but it is also full, rich with community and purpose. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the clouds in fiery hues of orange and purple. The air grows colder, the wind picking up slightly. You pull your collar tighter. There is a faint smell in the air, a metallic tang that sometimes precedes a shift in the weather, but you pay it no mind. Just another change in the wind, another night drawing in. The sea hums its ancient lullaby, a familiar, comforting sound. No omens, no warnings, just the quiet, predictable unfolding of another evening on the edge of the world. The world that has always been and always will be. The first light of morning paints the eastern sky in soft pastels, chasing away the lingering shadows of a night spent in peaceful slumber. You wake not to the clang of an alarm, but to the distant cries of gulls and the rhythmic whisper of the waves upon the shore. It is a sound so constant, so ingrained in the very fabric of life here, that you barely notice it most of the time. It is simply the backdrop to your existence, an ancient companion. You stretch, feeling the stiffness leave your limbs as you rise from your straw-filled mattress. The air inside your humble cottage is cool, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke from the hearth and the salty tang of the sea. You dress quickly in practical homespun garments, ready to face the day. Outside, the village is already stirring. Wisps of smoke curl lazily from stone chimneys, hinting at the morning fires being stoked. The air fills with the quiet sounds of awakening life. The low bleating of a goat, the distant clucking of hens, the gentle creak of a cart wheel as someone begins their day's work. Children, still rubbing sleep from their eyes, are already spilling from doorways, their bare feet silent on the packed earth paths. Their laughter, initially soft and hesitant, will soon grow boisterous as the day progresses. You step out, taking a deep breath of the fresh, clean air. The sun, a pale disk above the horizon, casts long shadows across the simple, sturdy homes built from local stone and timber, thatched with reeds gathered from the marshlands. These homes have stood for generations, their walls thick and resilient, designed to offer shelter from the biting winter winds and the occasional squall. They are not grand, but they are honest, reflecting the pragmatic spirit of the people who built them. You walk towards the communal well, the well-worn path a testament to countless footsteps before yours. Here you greet your neighbors, sharing a nod, a smile, a few murmured words about the weather or the day's tasks. Their faces are familiar, their lives intertwined with yours in a tapestry woven over decades, even centuries. You know their joys, their sorrows, their quiet strengths. This is not just a collection of houses. It is a family bound by the shared rhythm of the sea and the land. The men are already heading towards the small harbor, their fishing boats bobbing gently in the calm waters. You hear the familiar thud of oars against rowlocks, the rustle of nets being carefully untangled, the low calls exchanged as they prepare to set sail. The sea, which offered its bounty yesterday, will do so again today. It is a promise, a contract almost between humanity and the vast, powerful expanse of water. For some, the day involves tending small plots of land further inland, where hardy vegetables and grains are coaxed from the soil. For others, it is the craft of the artisan, the weaving of baskets from willow, the mending of fishing nets, the shaping of wood into tools or simple furniture. The rhythmic tap of a hammer, the soft whir of a spinning wheel, the insistent scrape of a sharpening stone. These are the soundscape of productive labor, a hum of purposeful activity that defines the waking hours. The women gather seaweed from the shore, not just for fertilizer but also for fuel, its salty essence filling the air as it dries. They mend clothes, prepare meals, churn butter, their hands moving with the efficiency born of long practice. Their work is the quiet cornerstone of the village, ensuring sustenance and comfort, maintaining the steady heartbeat of home. Children, once their morning chores are done, gather on the beach, skipping stones across the water, collecting shells, their small voices carrying on the breeze. They learn the ways of the sea almost instinctively, watching their elders, absorbing the knowledge passed down through generations. They know the tides, the currents, the names of the fish, the habits of the seabirds. The sand beneath their feet, the waves lapping at their ankles. These are their earliest teachers, their first companions. The village itself is a testament to resilience, a cluster of life clinging to the very edge of the continent. Its roots run deep into the soil, its foundations seemingly immutable. You cannot imagine a time when it was not here or a time when it might cease to be. The sea may occasionally rage, sending its spray high onto the cliffs, but these are mere tantrums, quickly forgotten once the sun returns and the waters recede. The people have learned to live with the sea, to respect its power, to harvest its gifts, and to ignore its occasional warnings. There are old wives' tales, of course, whispered by grandmothers on long winter nights, stories of monstrous waves, of entire stretches of coastline swallowed by the deep. But these are tales from a distant past, exaggerated perhaps, or belonging to a time when people knew less, when their boats were frailier, their homes less sturdy. In your time, with your strong boats and well-built houses, those fears seem fanciful, mere entertainment for impressionable ears. The ancient stories are charming, perhaps, but not truly relevant. They are part of the past, not the present. The afternoon brings a brief lull in the most strenuous activities. There is time for mending, for quiet conversation, for the sharing of news. Perhaps a merchant arrives from an inland town, his cart laden with goods not found by the sea, grains, spices, tools of metal. This isn't an event, a connection to the world beyond their immediate horizon, a chance to trade salted fish and dried herbs for new necessities. The small marketplace comes alive with bartering, with the exchange of news and gossip, strengthening the ties that bind this community together. As the sun begins its slow descent, the rhythm shifts once more. The fishing boats return, their sails full or their oars pulling steadily, bringing in the day's catch. The children rush to greet them, eager to see what wonders the sea has yielded. The women gather at the harbor, ready to help unload, to clean, to prepare the fish for immediate consumption or for preservation through salting and drying. The smell of wood smoke intensifies as evening meals are prepared. The savory aroma of fish stew, perhaps with wild herbs and root vegetables, drifts through the air. Families gather around hearths, sharing food, sharing the day's experiences. The conversations are simple, centered on the practicalities of life, on the small joys and challenges of their shared existence. There is a deep comfort in this routine, in the predictable unfolding of day after day, season after season. You sit by your own fire, the flames casting dancing shadows on the stone walls. The day has been good, productive. The future seems to stretch out before you, an endless continuation of what is. The sea outside sings its familiar tune, a gentle, hypnotic sound. It promises nothing but more of the same, more mornings, more evenings, more work, more community. It has always been this way. Will always be this way. The belief in the constancy of their world is absolute, born of generations living in harmony with nature's cycles. There is no hint of the fragility of their existence, no premonition of the unprecedented fury that will soon descend. The very landscape itself, with its weathered cliffs and steadfast shores, seems to assure them of their safety, of their rightful place. The gulls cry their last calls of the day, circling overhead, then settling into their nests on the high cliffs. The stars begin to prick the darkening sky, a familiar blanket above a familiar world. You prepare for sleep, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow will bring another sunrise, another opportunity to live this life, this good life, on the edge of the boundless ocean. The gentle rhythm of these shores is a lullaby, a promise whispered by the waves. It is a promise that will soon be broken, shattered into a million fragments by a single catastrophic night. But now, in this moment, there is only peace, only the deep, unshakable certainty of permanence. The world feels eternal. The profound peace of the previous night, that deep, unshakable certainty of permanence, begins to subtly fray as the new day dawns. You awaken not to the usual gentle caress of the sea breeze, but to a different quality in the air. It is thicker, heavier, carrying a strange electrical charge that prickles your skin even before you step outside. The sun, when it eventually rises, is not the familiar golden orb that paints the water in shimmering hues. Instead, it is a diffuse, watery light, struggling to penetrate a sky that already feels burdened. You walk towards the shoreline, your bare feet sinking into the cool, damp sand. Usually, the gulls would be crying overhead, a cacophony of greetings to the morning. Today their calls are muted, their numbers fewer. They sit hunched on the rocks, their heads tucked beneath their wings, an unusual stillness about them. The terns, typically diving and swirling with agile grace, are absent from the immediate coast. You notice the fishermen, normally bustling with their nets and tackle, standing by their boats, their gazes fixed on the horizon. There is a quiet consultation, a murmuring of voices, each one laced with an unspoken question. The tide, usually predictable in its ebb and flow, seems to have a new, restless energy. The waves that lap at your feet are not the gentle rollers of yesterday. They break with a more aggressive hiss, pulling back the sand with a stronger undertow. You watch a piece of driftwood, usually carried smoothly to shore, wrestle violently with the surf before being flung onto the sand with surprising force. The air smells different too. It is not just the salt and iodine of the sea. There is an added sharpness, a metallic tang that hints at something brewing far out beyond the visible horizon. You turn your attention to the clouds. They are gathering not in the fluffy white clusters of a fair-weather day, but in heavy, low-slung masses that seem to absorb the light rather than reflect it. They are dark bellies, churning slowly, like some gargantuan beast awakening from a long slumber. The distant line where the sea meets the sky, usually a crisp definition, is now blurred, a murky gray band that promises nothing good. The wind, when it finally stirs, is not the steady, predictable current that fills the sails of the fishing boats. It comes in sudden, unpredictable gusts, whipping your hair across your face, carrying with it a chill that seems out of place for the season. The old ones in the village, their faces etched with the wisdom of countless seasons, are the first to voice their concerns. You see them standing outside their cottages, their eyes scanning the sky, their hands perhaps shielding their eyes from the strange, filtered light. Their conversations are terse, punctuated by long silences. You might hear whispers of a weather breeder, a storm that grows not from a simple change in the wind, but from a deeper, more fundamental shift in the very temperament of the world. They speak of the sea turning dark, of the birds going high, or of the unique way the air feels when a great storm is brewing. These are not scientific observations. They are inherited instincts, passed down through generations who lived and died by the sea's mercy and its wrath. As the morning wears on, the signs multiply and become more insistent. The leaves on the trees, usually rustling gently, begin to shiver with an unnatural agitation. Dogs in the village bark with an unfamiliar intensity, their barks echoing through the narrow lanes, or else they cower, whimpering, beneath the shelter of homes. The very atmosphere seems to press down on you, a physical weight that makes breathing feel heavier. The distant rumble you hear is not thunder in the traditional sense, but a low, sustained growl, like the earth itself expressing its displeasure. It emanates from the direction of the open ocean, a deep vibration that you feel as much as here, resonating in your chest. The sea continues its transformation. The waves grow larger, their white caps appearing not just at the shore, but further out, speckling the dark expanse of water like a flock of agitated gulls. The deep blue of the ocean has given way to a brooding, steel gray, reflecting the ominous sky above. The horizon, once a promise of endless expanse, now seems to close in, becoming a wall of impending darkness. The air smells distinctly of rain, even though no drops have yet fallen. It is the scent of a storm front, a colossal atmospheric engine churning its way towards your quiet village. You see the fishermen now, not just observing but actively securing their vessels. They pull their small boats higher up the beach, beyond the reach of the encroaching tide, using ropes and heavy stones to anchor them firmly. There is a sense of urgency in their movements, a practiced efficiency born of long experience. Their faces are grim, their usual banter replaced by a focused determination. Women gather their laundry from the lines, children are called indoors, their play interrupted by a sudden, unspoken command. The rhythm of daily life, so steady and predictable just hours ago, is now fractured, overtaken by a creeping sense of alarm. By mid-afternoon, the wind has become a continuous howl. It no longer comes in gusts but is a sustained, powerful force, bending the trees, tearing at the thatched roofs of the cottages. Fine sand lifted from the beach whips through the air, stinging your face. The light continues to dim, even though it is still hours until sunset. It is an unnatural twilight, casting long, distorted shadows that dance wildly in the wind. The sky is now a seamless, unbroken blanket of leaden gray, pressing down on the landscape, making the world feel smaller, more vulnerable. The sound of the sea is no longer a lullaby but a roar. The waves crash against the cliffs with a new, terrifying force, sending plumes of spray high into the air. The very ground beneath your feet seems to vibrate with the impact. You can feel the tremor through the soles of your shoes, a constant, unsettling pulse. The distant growl has intensified, becoming a continuous, guttural sound, like a primordial beast awakening. This is not just a storm, you realize. This is something far greater, something that carries the raw, untamed power of the planet itself. The experienced eyes of the villagers, those who have weathered countless gales, recognize the signs. They know the difference between a rough day at sea and a truly catastrophic event. The particular color of the waves, the unusual direction of the wind shifts, the specific patterns of the clouds, the feel of the barometer dropping rapidly, even the way the local herbs seem to shrink away from the impending atmospheric pressure. All these tiny, almost imperceptible signals, woven together, paint a grim picture. They speak of a fury rarely witnessed in a lifetime, a storm that does not merely pass, but one that reshapes the very land it touches. You watch as the last fishing vessel, a larger craft, is painstakingly hauled ashore by a dozen strong men, their muscles straining against the immense weight, their faces grimly set. They work in silence, their movements economical, their eyes constantly darting to the churning sea. The children, now safely indoors, peer out from windows, their small faces pressed against the glass, reflecting the growing dread. The village, once so vibrant and full of life, falls silent, save for the escalating symphony of wind and waves. The air itself seems to thicken with an unspoken fear. The world outside has become a swirling vortex of sensory overload. The incessant shriek of the wind, the booming thunder of the waves, the darkening sky, the stinging sand. The subtle whispers of forgotten storms have now become a deafening shout, a clear, unmistakable warning that the balance of nature is about to be violently disrupted. You find yourself retreating indoors, seeking the meager shelter of your cottage, but the very walls seem to vibrate with the impending tempest. The gentle rhythm of these shores, which promised permanence just yesterday, now sings a different tune. It is a dirge, a prophecy of the night to come, a night that will irrevocably change everything. The omens, once subtle, have now declared their full intent. The world, which felt eternal, now feels acutely fragile. The world around you, previously just hinting at its wrath, now unleashes it with a sudden, savage roar. The last vestiges of twilight are not merely fading, they are violently ripped away, swallowed whole by an encroaching, unnatural gloom. It is not the gentle descent of evening you know, but an instantaneous, suffocating blanket of blackness that smothers the landscape. You press against the window, though the glass itself seems to hum with strain, and peer out into the chaos. What little you can discern through the rapidly thickening sheet of rain and wind-whipped sea spray is terrifying. The horizon has vanished, consumed by a monumental wall of storm clouds that blot out any hope of a moon or distant star. The wind, no longer a shriek, has become a guttural bellow, a primal sound that rattles your very bones. It screams through every crack and crevice of your simple cottage, tearing at the thatched roof and clawing at the wooden shutters with incredible force. Each gust feels like a physical blow against the house, a giant's fist pounding relentlessly on your fragile sanctuary. Outside, the familiar sounds of the village are replaced by a symphony of destruction. You hear the sharp, splintering crack of timber as something gives way, the high-pitched whine of metal twisting, the deep, resonant thud of objects being hurled against one another. It is a symphony of pure, unadulterated power, a sound that promises nothing but devastation. The rain arrives not as drops, but as solid sheets of water, driven horizontally by the gale. It hammers against the walls and roof, a relentless drumming that threatens to drown out even the wind's roar. You can feel the dampness seeping through the old stone and timber, a cold, pervasive chill that hints at the water's inevitable infiltration. The air inside your small home grows heavy, laden with the scent of damp earth and salt, a constant reminder of the ocean's terrifying proximity. Even the faint glow of your lantern struggles against the encroaching darkness, its flame flickering wildly with every shudder of the house. You draw closer to its meager warmth, a futile gesture against the chill that permeates everything. The sea, your neighbor and provider, has transformed into a monstrous adversary. Its waves, once a rhythmic lullaby, now crash with the force of collapsing buildings, sending tremors through the very ground beneath your feet. You do not need to see them to know their immense power. You feel the vibration in your chest, the deep, resonating boom that echoes long after the sound of the impact has faded. It is a sound that speaks of erosion, of land being torn away, of the very foundations of your world being undermined. The roar of the surf seems to mingle with the howl of the wind, creating an indescribable cacophony that attacks your senses from every direction. Hours stretch into what feels like an eternity. Time loses its meaning in the relentless assault. You pace, you sit, you stand, always listening, always bracing yourself for the next violent lurch of the house, the next deafening roar. Each moment is a test of endurance, a battle against the rising tide of fear. You imagine your neighbors in their own cottages, huddled together, facing the same terror, their faces illuminated by the frantic glow of their own lanterns. Are they safe? Are their homes holding? These questions flash through your mind, only to be swept away by the immediate, overwhelming reality of your own struggle for survival. The water begins to find its way inside. First, a thin, cold seep beneath the door, then a trickle from a crack in the wall, then a steady drip from the ceiling. It is insidious, unrelenting. You place pots and pans to catch the drips, but it feels like a child's game against the vast, untamed force that surrounds you. The floor grows slick, reflecting the dancing light of your lamp, making the small space feel even more precarious. You pull your clothing tighter, shivering not just from the cold, but from the profound sense of vulnerability. The wind seems to develop a new, more sinister quality. It is no longer just powerful, it feels sentient, a malevolent entity seeking to pry your home apart, piece by agonizing piece. You hear the groaning of timbers, the creaking of floorboards, sounds that usually speak of an old house settling, but now tell a story of impending structural failure. The entire dwelling seems to be breathing, expanding and contracting with each surge and ebb of the wind, a living thing under incredible duress. You find yourself holding your breath, waiting for the inevitable moment when some critical part of its integrity finally yields. Outside, the darkness remains absolute, pierced only by the occasional flash of lightning, a fleeting, blinding glimpse of the apocalyptic scene unfolding. For a split second, you might catch a horrifying vision, the silhouette of a tree bent double, its branches torn away, the white foam of a monumental wave crashing far too close to what should be dry land, the ghostly outline of a neighboring cottage still standing for now. Each flash is a jolt to your already frayed nerves, a terrifying postcard from a world gone mad. Then just as quickly the darkness returns, leaving you to piece together the nightmare in your imagination. The air is thick with flying debris. Even through the sound of the storm, you can discern the rattling impact of small stones, broken branches, and even larger objects striking your walls and roof. The very fabric of the village is being systematically dismantled, piece by piece, carried aloft by the enraged winds and dashed against whatever stands in their path. You press yourself against an inner wall, seeking the imagined protection of its solidity, knowing that the outer world is now a deadly gauntlet of flying projectiles. This is not merely a storm, it is an elemental assault, a concentrated act of nature's rawest power. It speaks to something ancient, a force that predates human memory, a reminder of the Earth's indifferent, overwhelming strength. You are no longer an observer of history but a participant, caught in a moment that will forever define what it means to face the fury of the sky and the sea combined. The hours crawl by, each one more harrowing than the last, as the storm shows no signs of relenting, only intensifying its destructive symphony. The thought of dawn, of relief, seems impossibly distant, a hopeful fantasy in the heart of this enduring night. You are utterly alone, utterly at the mercy of the tempest, and the world outside has dissolved into an indistinguishable maelstrom of sound and fury. The world outside has indeed dissolved, but not into an empty void. It is a world remade by water. Beneath the relentless shriek of the wind, a new, more terrifying sound begins to assert itself. It is a deep, guttural rumble, a sound that shakes the very earth beneath your feet, not with the abrupt shock of thunder, but with a sustained, churning power. This is the ocean roaring, no longer a distant whisper or a crashing wave on a far-off shore, but a monstrous entity now at your doorstep, demanding entry. You can feel the house shudder, not just from the wind's assault, but from a new, unsettling pressure building against its foundations. There is a strange, sucking sound, then a sharp crack, followed by the unmistakable splash of water. It is not rain falling from above, it is water surging in from below. A cold, briny trickle finds its way under the doorframe, a dark, invading tendril snaking across the floorboards. Then another and another until thin rivulets merge into a widening pool. The salt taste in the air grows stronger, sharp and metallic. You brace yourself against the wall, watching in the intermittent flashes of lightning, or perhaps just the sheer intensity of the storm itself as the water quickly climbs. It creeps over your feet, icy and shocking, rising steadily with an inexorable patience that is far more terrifying than the wind's erratic violence. Furniture legs become islands, then submerged hulks. The familiar floor of your home transforms into a dark, swirling surface, reflecting the chaos of the night. The sounds multiply. The tearing shriek of the wind is now interwoven with the frantic sloshing of water inside, the ominous groans of stressed timbers, and the sickening thud of unseen objects being flung against the exterior walls. You are no longer merely enduring a storm. You are immersed in an oceanic invasion. The cold seeps into your bones, a constant gnawing presence. Every muscle tenses, every nerve strains, searching for a solid anchor in a world rapidly liquefying around you. You lift yourself onto a table, then a high chest, seeking even a few inches of respite from the frigid surge. The water continues its relentless climb, consuming the domestic world around you. The air itself feels heavy, saturated, like breathing underwater. You can hear the distant yet shockingly clear sound of other structures failing, of walls giving way, of the world outside your small temporary sanctuary being dismantled piece by piece. These are the sounds of a community, a collection of lives and histories, being erased. The house creaks and groans like a ship in a typhoon, swaying precariously on its loosened moorings. You realize with a chilling clarity that its foundations are being undermined, scoured away by the relentless current. The floorboards beneath you become unstable, shifting and groaning under the water's pressure. The air fills with the acrid scent of damp wood and something else, something metallic and foreboding. Darkness, when it returns between the blinding flashes, is absolute. It is not merely the absence of light, but a thick, oppressive blanket that magnifies every terrifying sound. You are blind, deafened by the storm's roar, yet acutely aware of every tremor, every shift, every rising inch of water. The hours stretch into an eternity. Time loses all meaning in this liquid, furious void. Each breath is an effort, each moment a battle against the rising cold and the crushing weight of dread. Survival becomes a primal instinct, stripped of all thoughts save for the immediate, overwhelming need to stay afloat, to stay above the menacing dark water. You push against the ceiling, imagining its strength, praying it will hold. The very air you breathe feels thin, stolen. The incessant sound of the ocean, a monstrous, hungry maw, seems to be everywhere within you, around you, threatening to swallow you whole. The fatigue is immense, a heavy cloak that threatens to pull you down into the swirling depths. Your muscles ache, your eyes burn from staring into the impenetrable blackness, and your mind races with 1,000 impossible scenarios. Will the house hold? Will the water ever recede? Will the dawn ever break? This night is a vast, unending testament to nature's unchecked power, a living, breathing nightmare from which there seems no escape. You cling to whatever small purchase you can find, every fiber of your being screaming against the cold and the fear. The sheer duration of the assault is bewildering. It feels as though days have passed, not mere hours. The wind howls a furious dirge, and the ocean continually hammers against everything in its path, dissolving the boundaries between land and sea, between safety and oblivion. You are a tiny, fragile speck in a universe of pure, unadulterated chaos. As the night wears on, a new, more profound exhaustion sets in, a weariness of the spirit. The hope that glimmered faintly earlier has dwindled to a single, sputtering ember. You try to conjure images of daylight, of a calm sea, of solid ground beneath your feet, but they are fleeting, ghostly apparitions quickly swallowed by the roaring darkness. The world as you knew it has ceased to exist, replaced by this watery, tumultuous hell. You are adrift, even within the confines of your own home, on an ocean that has claimed the land. The very air vibrates with the raw energy of an elemental force beyond comprehension, beyond any human capacity to resist. All you can do is hold on, minute by agonizing minute, and wait for a dawn that may never come, or for a world irrevocably changed. The first whispers of dawn are not gentle. They are a brutal, creeping gray that bleeds into the bruised, retreating darkness, revealing not a calm, familiar world, but something alien and broken. You crane your neck, squinting against the still howling wind that now carries a different kind of sound. Not the crash of waves, but the eerie, almost polite gurgle of water swirling where land once stood firm. The rain has lessened, a weary drizzle replacing the deluge, but the wind remains a cruel companion, whistling through invisible gaps, stirring the remnants of what was. As the light strengthens, painting the sky with faint, exhausted hues of pearl and slate, you begin to see. And what you see twists your gut, a cold, hard knot of disbelief. The world is not merely changed, it has been fundamentally rewritten, erased by the furious hand of the tempest. The very air feels different now, heavy with the scent of salt, damp earth, and an unsettling emptiness. The cacophony of the storm is gone, replaced by a silence so profound it aches, broken only by the mournful cry of a distant gull, a sound that cuts through the stillness like a jagged shard of glass. This is the silence of absence, the chilling quiet where bustling life once thrived. You stand amidst what was once your home, your village. Or rather, you stand where your home should have been. What greeted you yesterday evening with its reassuring familiarity has vanished. The sturdy walls, the thatched roof, the small garden plot where you grew your herbs and vegetables, all have been ripped away, swallowed by the relentless surge. There are no walls, no roof, no garden. Just a churning, muddy expanse where water recedes in hesitant, lapping movements, leaving behind a chaotic collage of splintered wood, torn thatch, and unrecognizable debris. Where the village path once wound, leading to the baker, the cooper, the church, there is now only a vast, flat plain of waterlogged earth, punctuated by bizarre, uprooted shapes. A lone chimney stack, defiantly upright, seems to gaze across the desolation like a bewildered sentinel. A child's wooden toy, remarkably intact, floats idly in a newly formed puddle, a stark, heartbreaking testament to the lives that were here just hours before. The sight of it hits you with a force that steals your breath, a sudden, searing pain in your chest. You turn slowly, your gaze sweeping across the landscape. The contours of the land itself are altered. Hills you knew have softened, their edges blurred by erosion. Valleys have deepened, transformed into temporary lakes. The shoreline, once a clear demarcation, has retreated inland or perhaps advanced, it is hard to tell. The very geography of your existence has been reshaped, rendering maps obsolete and memory unreliable. The first, desperate thought that claws at your mind is for others. Your family. Your neighbors. Where are they? Did they find higher ground? Did they survive the night? You begin to move, stumbling over unseen obstacles, your boots sinking into the saturated earth. Every step is heavy, each breath a struggle against the overwhelming grief that threatens to engulf you. You call out. Your voice, hoarse and thin, is swallowed by the vast emptiness, producing no echo, no response. The silence is absolute, mocking. You push on, compelled by a primal need to search, to know, even as a creeping dread whispers that the answers you seek might be too terrible to bear. You look for familiar landmarks, hoping they might guide you to a surviving pocket of humanity, a sign of life. But the old oak tree that marked the village square is gone, ripped from its roots, its enormous trunk now lying prone, half submerged in a newly created marshland. The stone bridge over the stream, a crossing you have taken thousands of times, is reduced to a pile of rubble, its arches shattered, its purpose erased. The stream itself has swelled into a wide, sluggish river, its banks indistinguishable from the surrounding sodden fields. The sheer scale of the destruction begins to sink in, a heavy, suffocating blanket of despair. This is not just one house or one field. This is the entire fabric of your world, torn to shreds, scattered to the winds. The homes of your friends, the workshops of the craftsmen, the small, bustling market square where you would gather for news and trade, all gone. Their absence is a gaping maw in the landscape, a void that resonates with the echoes of lives abruptly silenced. You see a roof, remarkably intact, floating like a morbid raft in a vast expanse of water that stretches to the horizon. It is a house no longer fixed to its foundation, but adrift, a ghost ship carrying silent memories. You try to remember whose house it was, whose laughter once spilled from its windows, whose fires warmed its hearth. But the image is too surreal, too horrifying to fully process. The air itself seems to hum with the lingering energy of the catastrophe, a silent testament to the unimaginable forces unleashed. You touch the cold, wet ground, feeling its unstable give beneath your fingers. It feels alien, unfamiliar, like touching a landscape on another planet. The very earth beneath your feet feels rewritten, its history wiped clean in one devastating night. You are not alone in this landscape of ruin, though for a long time it feels that way. Eventually, you begin to see other figures, emerging from the edges of the devastation, spectral and dazed, like survivors from a forgotten dream. They move slowly, hesitantly, their faces etched with the same incomprehension and profound loss that grips your own. There is no cheering, no shouts of relief. Only a shared, heavy silence, an unspoken understanding of the tragedy that has befallen them all. Their eyes meet yours, wide and vacant, mirroring the question that hangs unspoken in the damp air. What now? The sun, now higher in the sky, begins to burn through the last vestiges of cloud, casting a pale, watery light over the scene. It illuminates the wreckage with an almost cruel clarity, highlighting every splinter, every broken brick, every abandoned belonging. This is the sunrise on silence. This is the world rewritten. Your mind struggles to make sense of the new reality. Where will you go? What will you do? The comforting routines of life, the rhythms of the seasons, the familiar faces and places that defined your existence, have all been swept away. You are standing on a blank page, the previous chapter ripped out and discarded, the story of your life, of your community, of your very identity now waiting to be rewritten. But by whom? And with what ink? The land, once a steadfast anchor, has proven itself to be as transient as the waves that battered it. The sea, once a provider and a boundary, has become a destroyer and an usurper. The fundamental relationship between man and nature, between settlement and storm, has been violently recalibrated. You walk through the desolate expanse, your steps heavy with the weight of unshed tears and unspoken grief. You recognize a broken wagon wheel, a piece of pottery, a fragment of cloth, each a shard of a life, a whisper of a memory. Each discovery is a fresh stab of pain, a reminder of what was and what will never be again. The sun continues its slow ascent, its light growing stronger, warmer, but unable to thaw the chill that has settled deep within your bones. It reveals the true extent of the catastrophe, a panorama of erased history. Entire villages, once vibrant hubs of human activity, are gone, leaving behind only the ghostly outlines of foundations or sometimes nothing at all. They have simply vanished, claimed by the sea and the storm, becoming legends before their time. The world has been rewritten, not with ink on paper but with water and wind on the very face of the earth. And you, a lone survivor, are left to read the stark, terrible message of its new chapters. The silence deepens as you realize that the story of these vanished villages is now yours to carry, a heavy burden in a world made new and terrifyingly empty. The morning advances, and with it, the scale of human loss begins to manifest. You start to see others like yourself wandering through the debris, their movements slow and dreamlike, driven by a primal need to search for something, anything that remains. They are ghosts in a ghost land, silently bearing witness to the obliteration of their past. The air is thick with the unspoken questions, the unanswerable prayers, the beginning of a grief that will span generations. This dawn is not a promise of a new day, but a stark revelation of the night's ultimate victory. The world has indeed been irrevocably changed. You stand on ground that feels strangely soft beneath your feet, a mixture of newly deposited silt and the pulverized remnants of what once was. The air, though clearing, still carries the faint, metallic scent of damp earth and something indefinable, something akin to sorrow. You look out, expecting to see the familiar outlines of homes, the clustered roofs, the comforting geometry of a village. But there is nothing. Only a vast, flattened expanse, punctuated by skeletal trees and drifts of debris that defy easy identification. Where Main Street once ran, a clear path of packed earth leading to the village square, now there is only a shallow channel, carved by the furious rush of water. You try to orient yourself, searching for a familiar curve in the land, a particular stand of oak, anything that could tell you where you are, or more accurately, where you were. But the landscape itself has been fundamentally rearranged, scoured clean of its human imprint. The very earth seems to have swallowed its inhabitants' efforts, erasing their presence with an indifferent sweep. You might find, if you look very closely, the faint, mossy outline of a foundation stone, half buried in the new silt. It is a ghost line in the dirt, a whisper of a wall that once stood firm, supporting dreams and daily lives. Perhaps it belonged to the old baker's shop, where the scent of warm bread used to drift out onto the street each morning, a comforting promise of the day ahead. Or maybe it was the corner of the schoolhouse, a place filled with the echoes of children's laughter and the scratch of chalk on slate. Now there is only the silence, a profound, heavy quiet that presses in on your ears. The sheer, brute force required to achieve such obliteration is almost incomprehensible. Imagine the water not just rising but surging, carrying with it the weight of entire rivers, pushing with the power of 1,000 battering rams. Homes, built with care and generations of effort, were not merely damaged. They were disassembled, their timbers splintered, their bricks scattered, their very essence atomized and swept away. You see planks of wood, twisted and broken, but they are anonymous, stripped of their purpose, offering no clue as to the house they once formed a part of. There are no doors standing ajar, no windows shattered in their frames. There are no walls left leaning precariously, ready to collapse with the next gust of wind. These are not ruins in the conventional sense, where the skeletal remains of buildings offer a somber monument to what was. This is an absence, a gaping hole where presence used to be. The buildings have not just fallen. They have vanished, absorbed back into the chaotic elements from which their materials were originally drawn. You pick your way carefully through the jumbled piles of debris. Here, a shard of ceramic tile, its floral pattern still brightly colored, looks incongruous amidst the mud and splintered wood. There, a child's leather shoe, small and mud-caked, lies almost perfectly preserved, a poignant reminder of a life interrupted. You might find a book, its pages swollen and fused into a solid block, its story forever unreadable. A broken doll, its porcelain face serene despite its fractured limb, stares up at the indifferent sky. Each object is a tiny, terrible archive of a moment frozen in catastrophe. These are not treasures, not artifacts in the way an archaeologist seeks to unearth a lost civilization. These are simply the remnants of everyday lives, now imbued with an overwhelming significance precisely because they are all that is left. They are the mute witnesses to the night's devastation, fragments of stories that will never be fully told. You hold a smooth, river-worn stone in your hand, perhaps a garden ornament, or simply a stone collected by a child. Its texture is cool and unyielding, a small anchor in a world that has lost all its anchors. The absence of familiar landmarks creates a profound sense of disorientation. Where was the church steeple, its bell once marking the hours and summoning the faithful? Where was the sturdy stone bridge that spanned the narrow creek, connecting one side of the village to the other? Where was the old elm tree, under whose generous shade generations had sought respite from the summer sun? All gone. The landscape has been flattened, smoothed over, its defining features erased, making it impossible to navigate by memory alone. You are standing in a place that is both intensely familiar and utterly alien. It is as if the very memory of the village, held in the contours of its streets and the arrangement of its buildings, has been wiped from the earth. To walk here now is to walk in a void, a blank slate where vibrant communities once thrived. You try to superimpose the image of the vanished village onto the desolate reality before you, to see the spectral outlines of houses and shops, to hear the phantom sounds of laughter and conversation. But the present reality is too stark, too overwhelming. The ghost village you imagine is constantly overwritten by the mud-caked emptiness. The emotional toll of this obliteration is immense. Imagine the feeling of returning to where your home once stood only to find nothing. Not even a pile of rubble to sift through, not even a foundation to confirm its precise location. Just an expanse of featureless land. It is not just the loss of property, it is the loss of a tangible connection to your past, to your daily routine, to the very definition of your personal space. Your home is where your memories are stored, where your identity is rooted. When it vanishes without a trace, a part of you vanishes with it. For those who survived, the task of finding anything belonging to their former lives is a heartbreaking one. They do not search for valuables, they search for meaning. They search for a fragment of a photograph, a piece of clothing, a child's drawing, anything that can serve as an anchor to the lives they once led. You see them, stooped figures moving slowly across the ravaged land, their eyes scanning the ground with an almost desperate intensity. They are trying to reclaim something from the voracious maw of the storm, to piece together the shattered narrative of their existence. The enormity of what has occurred here extends beyond the physical destruction. It is a destruction of place, a destruction of memory, a destruction of the very framework that held these communities together. The villages did not just vanish, they were unmade, their presence on the map and in the minds of people erased by the relentless power of nature. You are not just witnessing the aftermath of a storm, you are witnessing a profound act of erasure, a testament to the fragile hold humanity has on the landscapes it inhabits. The very ground you walk on feels different now. It is no longer the familiar earth of a settled place, but a temporary surface, a shifting layer of sediment and sorrow. It seems to whisper of impermanence, of the swift and brutal hand of change. The footprints you leave behind in the soft earth feel transient, destined to be washed away by the next rain, just as the homes of these vanished villages were erased by the storm. You are a visitor in a land that has been reclaimed by the wild, a land that bears the scars of an unspeakable past, and offers a chilling glimpse into the indifferent power of the natural world. The quiet here is not peaceful. It is the silence of absence, the silence of a story abruptly ended. You listen, but there are no echoes, no lingering sounds of life. The wind rustles through the remaining sparse vegetation, a mournful sigh across a landscape that remembers everything, yet now holds nothing. The void is not empty, it is filled with the weight of all that was lost, a profound, invisible burden. And you, walking through it, carry a small part of that weight with every step. This is not a landscape of recovery, not yet. This is a landscape of reckoning, a place where the full, terrible truth of the storm's victory is laid bare. The homes that once stood here are not just gone. They are utterly forgotten by the earth itself, leaving only the faintest, most ephemeral footprints in the void, traces that only the most dedicated observer might ever hope to discern. You continue to walk, drawn onward by a morbid curiosity, by the need to understand, even as the scale of what you are witnessing threatens to overwhelm your senses. The emptiness stretches before you, an unending testament to a single night of ultimate fury. You stand in the silence, an echo of the fury you have already contemplated. But that fury, you realize now, was not merely a breath of wind, however catastrophic. It was something far more primal, an ancient force awakened from the deepest parts of the earth's own restless sleep. You close your eyes, and in the mind's eye, you begin to perceive the true architect of this absolute vanishing, the silent, relentless, and utterly indifferent hand that swept away every trace of human endeavor. It was water. Not just rain, not just a swollen river, but water in a form so vast, so powerful, that it defies ordinary comprehension. Imagine it now, not as a gentle lapping tide, but as a living wall, rising from the horizon, a dark, churning mass that obscures the sky itself. You are there, perhaps on the edge of the village, the air thick with an ominous hum, a low rumble that vibrates through the very ground beneath your feet. It is the sound of an approaching titan, a colossal wave, perhaps many waves, converging on this unsuspecting shore. This is not the sea you know. This is an entity of pure, unadulterated force, driven by the most profound disturbances in the Earth's atmosphere or crust. You feel the ground tremble, a deep, unsettling tremor, and then the sound intensifies, a roar that drowns out every other sensation, every thought. It is the sound of millions of tons of water, accelerated to impossible speeds, crashing down upon the land. The first impact is not just a splash, it is an explosion. You envision it striking the outermost homes, not merely pushing them, but obliterating them in a sickening symphony of splintering wood and crumbling stone. The structures, built with generations of careful handiwork, designed to withstand the ordinary trials of nature, offer no resistance. They simply cease to be coherent forms. The wave does not break upon them. It consumes them, absorbing their substance into its churning maw. You watch, helpless in this mental reconstruction, as the dark water surges inland, a relentless, unstoppable tide. It is not flowing, it is advancing, a liquid bulldozer sweeping aside everything in its path. Trees, centuries old, are ripped from the earth as if they were fragile weeds. Their roots, once anchors, become levers prying up the very soil. Roads, once solid arteries of the village, dissolve under the immense hydraulic pressure. The asphalt cracks, the paving stones lift, and the very ground beneath them is scoured away. Think of the sheer, unimaginable weight of it. A cubic meter of water weighs 1,000 kilograms. Now multiply that by the millions of cubic meters in this monstrous wave. This is kinetic energy on a scale that human engineering rarely encounters. You see it smash into the heart of the village, a force so absolute it doesn't just destroy, it disassembles. Homes don't merely collapse. Their walls explode outward, their roofs are torn free and spun like leaves in a hurricane. Furniture, heirlooms, the accumulated memories of countless lives, are instantly pulverized or swallowed whole by the raging torrent. The water is not clear. It is a thick, brown, churning broth of mud, debris, and the pulverized remains of an entire community. You hear the sickening crunch of timber, the tearing shriek of metal, the rumble of dislodged earth. But above all, you hear the overwhelming, all-consuming roar of the water itself, a sound that promises no end, only absolute dissolution. As the first wave passes, leaving behind a temporary, horrifyingly transformed landscape, you might imagine a brief moment of quiet, a gasping pause. But there is no such mercy. More waves follow, perhaps smaller, perhaps just as immense, each one driving further inland, each one cleaning the slate more completely. They don't just clear the debris, they scour the very foundations of the vanished homes. The ground itself is not spared. Soil, often built up over centuries of human interaction and cultivation, is stripped away, revealing raw bedrock or deep, underlying strata. This is the work of erosion on a scale compressed into minutes. The earth, which once bore the gentle imprint of human habitation, is now violently reshaped, carved anew by an invisible liquid chisel. You perceive the land being fundamentally altered, its contours smoothed or gouged, its familiar features utterly erased. What remains is not just a pile of rubble, it is often a featureless plain, wiped clean as if by a giant, indifferent hand. And then comes the retreat. Just as powerfully as it arrived, the water begins to recede, not gently, but with a horrifying suction. It pulls everything back with it. What wasn't pulverized on impact is now dragged, rolled, tumbled, and carried out to sea, or into the churning depths of a newly formed lake, or down a violently recarved riverbed. Foundations, cracked and weakened, are undercut and simply float away. Roads that were once damaged are now completely unraveled, their materials scattered across miles of coastline or buried beneath layers of new sediment far out in the water. You comprehend that this is why so little remains. The waves were not merely destructive, they were also agents of complete removal. They did not leave behind a battlefield of ruins. They left a void, a blank canvas where all memory of human presence was systematically obliterated. Imagine the sheer speed with which this transformation occurred. In the span of a single night, a few hours, perhaps even less, thriving villages were reduced to an absence, their existence purged from the visible landscape. The unseen architects were these waves. They did not discriminate. They did not spare the strong or the weak. They simply applied their immense, irresistible force. They were an indifferent force of nature, responding to vast planetary-scale energies, their approach heralded by that deep, primal rumble, their passing marked by absolute, chilling silence. This silence, you realize, is what you are walking through now. It is the echo of that complete annihilation. The emptiness is not just the absence of homes, it is the absence of the very ground that those homes stood upon. It is the absence of the paths, the gardens, the communal spaces. It is a landscape that has been not merely broken, but reset by the awesome power of water. You can almost feel the phantom currents, the colossal eddies that once swirled here, tearing at the fabric of the land. You can almost hear the roar that preceded the absolute quiet. The air you breathe, though still, seems to carry the ghost of that immense energy, a residual chill that speaks of unimaginable forces at play. The land itself seems to sag, exhausted by the trauma. It holds secrets beneath its now barren surface, layers of mud and silt that conceal the pulverized fragments of a vanished world. But on the surface, there is only the stark, uncompromising truth of the wave's victory. They were the ultimate engineers, designing a landscape of pure absence. They were the unseen architects, carving out this vast, featureless void with the relentless power of water, turning bustling life into a profound geological silence. And as you continue to walk, you carry the heavy knowledge of what it means for an entire world to simply disappear, swallowed by the waves, leaving nothing but an unending testament to their annihilating power. The waves left behind a testament to their annihilating power, yes, but that testimony is primarily about absence on the surface. Yet, beneath the very ground you stand upon, deep within the layers of sand and sediment, lies a different kind of testament. This is where the true stories are buried, encased in a silent, geological embrace. This is where the echoes of lost communities still linger, waiting for a sensitive ear to perceive them. You feel the slight give of the sand under your feet, the subtle shift as you walk. Imagine that beneath this seemingly uniform expanse, entire worlds are preserved. Not just fragments of pottery or the occasional bone, but the very footprint of human endeavor. Picture the foundations of houses, their timber frames collapsed but still discernible. See the outlines of ancient hearths, where fires once burned bright, warming families through long evenings. Imagine the faint, ghost-like traces of tools, of daily implements, of the very fabric of life, now pressed flat and still by the immense weight of time and earth. These were not just isolated dwellings. These were vibrant, interconnected villages. Envision the narrow, winding paths that served as streets, worn smooth by countless footsteps. You might almost hear the distant murmur of conversation, the laughter of children playing by the water's edge. Perhaps the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer carried on the wind, or the bleating of sheep from a nearby pasture. The air, though now tasting only of salt and wind, once carried the scent of wood smoke, of baking bread, of freshly tilled earth, and of the catches brought in by the fishing boats. Think of the people who inhabited these places. Farmers, their hands calloused from working the soil, their faces weathered by sun and wind. Fishermen, intimately familiar with the moods of the sea, their lives dictated by tides and currents. Artisans, creating practical and beautiful objects from wood, clay, and metal. Families gathered around tables, sharing simple meals, their days marked by the rising and setting of the sun, by the rhythm of the seasons, and by the comforting cadence of community life. You can almost see their faces, etched with the concerns and joys common to all humanity, living their lives with a profound connection to this very land, this very coastline. Their existence was deeply intertwined with the sea, both a provider and a formidable threat. They understood its power, respected its caprices, and built their lives around its proximity. Yet even with that understanding, the speed and ferocity of the great storm that erased them were beyond comprehension. One night, a single night, was enough to swallow generations of history, dreams, and daily toil. The structures that housed their lives, the fields that fed their families, the pathways that connected them, all succumbed to the overwhelming force. The water did not just erode, it engulfed, it buried, it sealed away. Now, as you stand here, feeling the persistent, gentle breath of the modern sea, it is difficult to reconcile this calm with the unimaginable chaos that once raged. But if you close your eyes and truly listen beyond the sound of the present waves, you might catch a whisper. Not an audible sound, but an imagined resonance. It is the echo of lives fully lived, abruptly silenced. It is the lingering imprint of human presence on a landscape that has tried its best to forget. Consider the depth of that loss. Not just a handful of homes, but entire social structures, traditions, and oral histories. The unique dialects, the local songs, the shared jokes, the intricate web of relationships that define these communities, all vanished in the churn and roar of the storm. There were no survivors, or so few that the collective memory was shattered beyond repair. The continuity of their culture broken. The threads of their lineage severed. The world they knew, along with all its intricate details, simply ceased to exist above the waterline. This profound silence, therefore, is not empty. It is pregnant with the absence of what was. It is a silence composed of countless unspoken words, of unfulfilled futures, of unremembered names. You are walking over a vast graveyard of human aspiration, a testament not just to the sea's power, but to the fragility of human existence when confronted by nature's fury. The earth here has become a vast archive, its pages written in mud and sand, preserving the memory of these forgotten people. Every now and then, the shifting sands or the persistent currents might reveal a fleeting glimpse. Perhaps a piece of ancient timber, dark and waterlogged, emerges from the depths. Or a fragment of a stone wall, briefly exposed before being claimed again by the tide. These are not mere archaeological finds. They are poignant messages from the past, brief windows into a world that was. They are the land itself, briefly exhaling a memory before settling back into its long, silent sleep. Imagine the last moments of these communities. The rising terror as the waters surged. The desperate scramble for safety. The heartbreaking realization that there was no escape. And then the overwhelming roar, the collapse, the final, terrifying darkness as the sea claimed everything. That raw, primal fear, though centuries old, feels strangely palpable in the air here. It is an understanding that goes beyond intellectual knowledge, settling deep into your bones as you absorb the sheer scale of the disaster. You are not merely observing a geological phenomenon, you are standing on a tomb. A collective tomb for people whose names are lost to time, whose stories are buried deeper than any grave marker could indicate. Their legacy is not in monuments or written histories, but in the very topography of this altered land, in the profound quietude that has settled over what was once a bustling human space. The land remembers even if we, as casual observers, sometimes forget to ask it to speak. This landscape, stark and beautiful in its desolation, asks you to pause, to look closer, and to listen with more than just your ears. It invites you to feel the weight of what lies beneath, the layers of time and tragedy. It encourages you to reconstruct, in your mind's eye, the vibrant lives that were extinguished here, to honor their memory by simply acknowledging their existence. For even in their utter physical disappearance, their human story resonates, a persistent echo from beneath the surface, reminding us of the transient nature of our own hold on the earth. You have felt the echo beneath the surface, the lingering presence of what once was. But what happens when that presence is not just forgotten, but actively wiped away? When the very concept of a place, a community, ceases to exist in the official records that shape our understanding of the world. This is where our journey takes a more somber turn, into the geography of absence, the stark reality of being erased from the atlas. Imagine holding an old map in your hands, its edges softened by time, its paper brittle with age. Your finger traces a line of a long-forgotten road, then stops at a tiny cluster of names, each denoting a village. Perhaps Fairhaven, or Stonewater, or Willow Creek. These names once pulsed with life, with the mundane routines and profound moments that define human existence. Now pick up a current map, pristine and crisp, its digital cousin perhaps even more stark in its omissions. You search for Fairhaven. It is not there. Stonewater? Vanished. Willow Creek? Gone, utterly absent from the modern cartographer's careful lines and labels. This is not merely a change of nomenclature, a simple update. This is an obliteration. The names, once solid markers of human endeavor, dissolve into the blank spaces or become subsumed by new, indifferent designations. The land itself may still be there, the contours of the hills, the winding path of a river, but the human imprint, the vital heart of a settlement, has been excised. The map, once a guide to life, becomes a testament to its erasure. Think of the meticulous work of mapmakers throughout history, their painstaking efforts to chart every river bend, every hamlet, every solitary farmstead. Each dot, each tiny printed word, represented countless hours of labor and the very real lives of people. To remove a name, then, is an act of historical violence, a quiet declaration that what once mattered no longer does. It is an official forgetting, a bureaucratic shrug in the face of profound human loss. For those who lived in these places or whose ancestors did, this erasure is more than academic. It is a deeply personal wound. Try to picture yourself. You tell a stranger where you are from or where your family originated. You point to a spot on an old chart, full of pride, full of memory. The stranger squints, then shakes their head. There's nothing there, they might say. Or worse, that place doesn't exist. The feeling must be akin to a part of your own identity being questioned, being denied. Your roots, the very ground beneath your feet, seem to vanish from under you. This leads us to the heart of what we call the geography of grief. Grief is often associated with the loss of a person, an individual, a loved one. But entire communities can grieve the loss of a place, not just a place they left, but a place that was simply swallowed whole. The land itself becomes a monument to what is missing. The wind, instead of carrying the scent of wood smoke from chimneys, now whistles through empty spaces. The rivers flow but no longer past busy mills or children playing by the banks. You walk through these altered landscapes now. Where once there were homes, you might find a field of wild grass, swaying gently in the breeze. Where a church once stood, perhaps a lone, gnarled tree, its roots delving deep into the memory-laden soil. The stones of the old foundations might still lie buried, silent witnesses to their own slow descent into the earth. But above ground, the visual cues, the signs of human habitation, are almost entirely gone. The very emptiness becomes a presence. It is a profound quiet that speaks volumes. It is a landscape shaped by absence, by a void. This is not the wilderness that nature created, untouched by human hand. This is a landscape that nature reclaimed, but with a stark, almost violent swiftness that leaves a different kind of scar. It is a place that tells a story of abrupt cessation, of lives cut short, of futures unfulfilled. Imagine the descendants of those who once called these vanished villages home. They carry with them not only stories passed down through generations, but also the strange burden of a place that no longer exists on any official record. Their heritage points to a phantom limb on the body of the earth. How do you honor a place that has no physical coordinates, no postal code, no entry in a gazetteer? How do you visit a grave site when the entire cemetery might be buried under meters of silt and rock, or even now lie at the bottom of a new placid lake? Their grief is a landscape itself, vast and often unspoken, defined by the boundaries of what was and what now is not. It is a yearning for a physical connection that has been severed, a desire to stand on the very ground where their great-grandparents lived and loved and labored. But that ground, as a distinct, named place, has ceased to be. The map, therefore, becomes not just a tool for navigation, but a canvas for memory and forgetting. When you look at an old map, you are not just seeing lines and names, you are seeing a snapshot of human aspiration, human resilience, and sometimes human vulnerability. When you compare it to a modern map and find those names gone, you are witnessing the quiet catastrophe of disappearance. These vanished villages remind us that geography is not static. It is a living, breathing entity, constantly reshaped not only by geological forces but also by human action and inaction, by memory and by erasure. The land itself may not weep, but it holds the imprint of sorrow, a silent witness to the sudden, brutal storms that can wipe a community clean off the face of the earth, and then, slowly, meticulously, erase it from the collective memory, leaving only ghosts on the oldest of maps. The act of remembering, then, becomes a rebellion against this erasure. It is an attempt to redraw the lines of human history, to fill in the blank spaces with the vibrant stories of those who once lived there. It is to acknowledge that every lost village, every vanished name, represents not just a geographical point, but a universe of human experience, a tapestry of lives abruptly unraveled. And by doing so, you keep their echo, their profound story, alive even when the atlases have chosen to forget. But what happens when the atlases forget, and the earth reclaims its secrets? What happens to the stories then? They do not vanish with the last crumbling stone. Instead, they are lifted, carried on the wind, whispered from one generation to the next, becoming the very fabric of identity for those who survived. You find yourself sitting by a hearth, the glow of embers painting dancing shadows on the faces around you, listening. The world outside may be modern, bustling, but here in this quiet space, time folds in on itself. You are transported not by a machine, but by the cadence of a voice, by the steady rhythm of a story passed down. Imagine the tremor in an elder's voice as they recount a night no one truly saw, only felt. A night that ripped apart their world and redefined the very concept of home. They speak of the storm not as a mere weather event, but as a living, breathing entity, a monstrous force that roared through their ancestral village. You hear the fear in their words, a fear that has been carefully preserved, like an heirloom, passed down through the years. It is a fear not just of the wind and the waves, but of the sudden, inexplicable loss, the complete obliteration of everything known. These are not merely historical accounts. They are lullabies in a sense, tales sung not just to soothe but to warn, to remember, to instill a connection to a place that no longer exists on any map. A child is cradled, eyes wide, listening to a melody woven with the names of forgotten streets, the rhythm of vanished tides. The words speak of a grandmother's garden, of a lighthouse that once stood sentinel against the tempest, of a specific tree where children played. You do not see these places, but you feel them bloom in your mind's eye, conjured by the power of narrative. The images are vivid, almost tangible. You can almost smell the salt spray, hear the distant chime of a bell buoy, feel the rough wood of a fishing boat under your fingertips. This oral tradition is a lifeline, a fragile thread connecting the living to the ghosts of their past. It is how the memory of the vanished village persists, not as a cold historical fact, but as a warm human truth. You learn of the fishing nets laid out to dry, of the chatter in the market square, of the taste of fresh bread from the village bakery. These sensory details are the true monuments, built not of stone, but of shared human experience. They are the details that the waves could not wash away, the winds could not scatter. They live on inside the people, imprinted on their souls. Consider the children born decades, even centuries after the cataclysm. They never saw the village, never felt the earth beneath their ancestral home. Yet, they know its topography more intimately than many living in its modern vicinity. They know the location of the church, the bend in the river, the house where their great-great-grandparents lived. Oh! Through these whispered stories, through the songs that describe the lay of the land, through the cautionary rhymes about the unpredictability of the sea or the mountain, you become one of these children, absorbing a phantom geography, a world built entirely of words and inherited emotions. The lullabies, therefore, are not simple tunes. They are condensed narratives, mnemonic devices, embedding complex histories within simple, repetitive phrases. Perhaps a mother sings a song about the moon over the old harbor, its light reflecting on waters that now cover ruins. Or a father teaches a chant about the strength required to rebuild, to carry on after the storm has passed. You listen closely, discerning the hidden layers of meaning, the grief wrapped in gentle melody, the resilience humming beneath a seemingly simple verse. These stories also serve as a communal act of mourning. The physical act of grieving a place is often overlooked, overshadowed by the grief for lost loved ones. But for an entire community, the loss of their home, their shared physical space, is a profound wound. The stories and songs become a collective lament, a way for the survivors and their descendants to acknowledge and process this immense foundational absence. You feel the weight of this collective sorrow, a deep ache for something you have never seen, yet feel connected to through blood and memory. The burden of memory is heavy, yet it is also a testament to human endurance. To remember is to assert existence, even in the face of annihilation. It is an act of defiance against the forces that sought to erase them entirely. You perceive the quiet strength in those who carry these memories, the unyielding spirit that refuses to let their heritage dissolve into the silent depths of the past. Their voices are not just telling stories, they are constructing an invisible monument, a living memorial woven from spoken word and shared sentiment. Sometimes the memory is tied to a salvaged object. Perhaps a carved wooden bird, retrieved from the wreckage and carefully preserved. Or a piece of faded fabric, woven by a hand long gone. These objects become powerful anchors for the vast, swirling narratives. You hold a smooth, water-worn stone, a relic said to be from the old village well, and suddenly the stories of gathering water, of shared gossip, of children playing, feel intensely real, almost as if the stone itself is humming with these echoes of life. The survivors, in their new homes far from the vanished village, built their identities around this profound loss. Their shared history of displacement and survival forged a unique bond. The lullabies and tales became their sacred texts, guiding their worldview, shaping their values. You observe how a community, stripped of its physical roots, can grow new ones in the soil of memory, nurtured by the continuous telling and retelling of their origin story. These stories are often replete with details about the storm itself, not just its destructive power, but its specific timing, its unique sound. It was the night of the full moon, an old woman might say, when the sea turned black and the wind shrieked like a banshee. These details are precise, almost forensic, because they were seared into the collective consciousness. You hear the precision in their language, the way they describe the rising water, the cracking timbers, the sheer terror of that single catastrophic night. And what about the lessons embedded within these narratives? Beyond the sorrow there is wisdom. Cautionary tales about respecting nature's power, about the impermanence of human endeavors, about the importance of community and mutual aid. You glean these lessons, understanding that the stories are not just about what was lost, but about how to live now, how to face future uncertainties, how to find strength in shared adversity. The rhythm of these stories becomes a heartbeat, a pulse that connects you to generations past. It is a reminder that even when the earth swallows up a place, the human spirit finds a way to preserve its essence, to hold on to what was precious. The names of the vanished villages may fade from official records, but in the hearts and minds of their descendants, they continue to exist, vibrant and alive, sustained by the endless current of memory, carried on the wind, echoing in every lullaby and whispered tale. This enduring legacy ensures that while the physical structures may have returned to the earth, the spirit of the people, their unique culture, and their profound connection to a specific patch of land lives on. You realize that a vanished village is never truly gone as long as there is someone left to tell its story, to sing its songs, to remember the specific way the sun set over its forgotten hills, or the particular scent of its hearth fires. It lives on in the human spirit, a testament to resilience, a quiet rebellion against erasure. It lives on in you as you listen, as you imagine, as you remember with them. The memory endures, yes, a testament to the human heart. But beneath those fading memories, beneath the quiet stories and the whispers of descendants, lies the raw, uncompromising truth of the land itself. The earth, you see, keeps its own counsel. It breathes. It shifts. It dreams. And sometimes, its dreams are violent. You stand now on ground that seems solid, enduring. Perhaps you feel the ancient rock beneath your feet, or the yielding soil of a cultivated field. But imagine this land in another time, a time before comprehensive maps, before sophisticated weather predictions, before the intricate network of modern infrastructure attempted to tame every wild current and shifting slope. You are in a world where the very ground beneath you held secrets, where the rivers were untamed arteries and the sea, an ever-hungry mouth. Think of those vanished villages, not just as places lost to memory, but as cautionary tales etched into the very fabric of the landscape. They disappeared not just due to time, but because of a sudden, brutal awakening of the earth around them. For many, it was the sea that delivered the final blow. You can almost feel the salt spray on your face, hear the relentless roar of waves that grew hour by hour, from a familiar lullaby to a terrifying battle cry. Imagine yourself in a small coastal settlement, perhaps a fishing village nestled precariously close to the water's edge. For generations your family has lived here, understanding the rhythms of the tide, respecting the power of the ocean. You know the whispers of the wind, the subtle shifts in the air that signal a change. But this night is different. The wind does not just whisper, it howls. It tears at the thatched roofs, rattles the wooden shutters, and carries the distant thunder of the surf not as a sound, but as a vibration through the very floorboards beneath your feet. You would have watched, heart pounding, as the tide began to rise, not just creeping up the beach, but surging, boiling, an angry entity overflowing its natural bounds. The waves, once friendly playmates, become monstrous claws, tearing at the dunes, undermining the foundations of homes. The sea, which provided sustenance, now threatens annihilation. You would have seen your neighbors, their faces etched with terror and grim determination, trying to shore up doors, trying to move what precious few possessions they could to higher ground, even as the water churned relentlessly around their ankles, then their knees. There is a moment, just before the complete inundation, when the village lights still glimmer, defiant beacons against the encroaching darkness and the white foam. You might hear cries, the desperate bleating of livestock, the creak and groan of timbers straining. And then the ultimate silence as the sea claims its prize. By morning, where houses once stood, where fishing boats were once moored, there is only an expanse of gray turbulent water. The village has not just been damaged, it has been swallowed whole. It has become one with the ocean, its stones and timbers scattered, its memory beginning its long journey into legend. But it was not just the sea that swallowed villages in their sleep. Inland, the rivers too held immense destructive power. You might live in a fertile river valley, the lifeblood of your community, providing water for crops and a route for trade. You know the river's moods, its gentle summer flow, its swollen spring bounty. But what happens when the rains do not stop? When they fall for days, relentless sheets of water that turn the usually placid current into a raging torrent. You would feel the ground growing saturated, the earth beneath your feet becoming soft, yielding. The river, usually contained by its banks, begins to spread, creeping across the fields, claiming pastures, turning paths into muddy streams. You would see debris floating by, uprooted trees, fences, the scattered remains of distant farms already overwhelmed. The air would be thick with the smell of wet earth and rising dread. As the river bursts its banks, it does not just flood, it reshapes. It carries away everything in its path with a force you cannot comprehend. Homes built with generations of labor, barns filled with winter stores, the church where your family worshipped, all become playthings for the furious waters. You might have only moments to grab your children, your livestock, to scramble to the highest ground, watching helplessly as the very ground your ancestors tilled turns into a churning, muddy lake. The sound alone would be terrifying. The roar of the water, the splintering of wood, the collapse of stone. When the floodwaters eventually recede, what remains is often a landscape utterly transformed. The village might be gone, not swept away entirely, but buried under feet of mud and silt, or reduced to a scattering of unrecognizable rubble. The river has literally erased it, leaving a scar on the land and an indelible trauma on the survivors. This, too, is the earth's unsettled sleep, a sudden brutal reassertion of its ancient untamed power. Then there are the quieter yet equally devastating shifts, the landslides and mudslides. Imagine living in a village nestled at the foot of a seemingly stable hillside, perhaps a slope covered in dense forest, offering shelter and resources. You feel secure, protected by the very landscape. But the earth beneath you is not always as solid as it appears. Heavy, prolonged rains can turn solid ground into a treacherous, unstable mass. The water seeps deep, saturating the soil, lubricating the rock layers, until the entire slope loses its grip. You would hear at first, perhaps, a low rumble, a creaking from deep within the earth, a sound that is both distant and terrifyingly close. Then, the grinding, tearing sound as trees begin to tilt, as the earth itself seems to sigh and then groan under an unbearable weight. And then, with an astonishing speed, the hillside begins to move. Not slowly like a glacier, but in a sudden, catastrophic rush. Imagine the ground beneath your feet lurching, twisting. Homes are not just swept away, they are crushed, buried, annihilated under tons of sliding earth, rock, and trees. The entire landscape rearranges itself in a matter of minutes, swallowing roads, fields, and entire communities. You would not have time to run, perhaps only to witness for a terrifying instant, the very world you knew disintegrating. The village is not just gone, it is entombed, swallowed whole by the very ground that was meant to sustain it. These stories of vanished villages, lost to the sea, to rampant rivers, to collapsing hillsides, are more than just tales of human tragedy. They are profound warnings from the past. They remind you of the delicate balance we strike with the natural world, a balance that can be shattered in a single night. They speak to the immense, untamed power that lies just beneath the veneer of human civilization. For centuries, humanity has sought to impose order on the chaos of nature, to build permanent structures, to draw lines on maps, to cultivate and control. But these vanished villages stand as stark reminders that the earth operates on its own timescale, with its own formidable will. You can build houses of stone, but the sea can erode their foundations. You can dam rivers, but a truly furious storm can make them overflow their bounds. You can settle in valleys, but the hills can choose to slide. The Earth's unsettled sleep is a cyclical phenomenon, a constant process of creation and destruction, reshaping the surface of our planet. These past catastrophes were not isolated incidents. They were manifestations of ongoing geological and meteorological processes. Coastal erosion continues today, slowly but inexorably claiming land. Extreme weather events, floods, and landslides remain potent threats in many parts of the world. When you learn about these villages, you are not just remembering history, you are witnessing a pattern. You are seeing the ancient forces that shaped our world, forces that are still very much active. The stories of these communities, suddenly erased, serve as a mirror reflecting our own vulnerability. They force you to consider where you build, how you build, and perhaps most importantly, how well you truly listen to the subtle warnings the environment provides. Consider the wisdom embedded in those who chose to resettle, to move inland, or to build new villages on higher, firmer ground. Their choices were born from bitter experience, from the raw, undeniable proof that some places, however beautiful or convenient, are simply too precarious. They learned to read the land not just for its bounty, but for its inherent dangers. They understood that the earth, in its deepest slumber, could still shift and dream violently. You are being asked, through these stories, to feel that ancient tremor. To understand that the ground beneath your feet is not eternally static, and the waters around you are not eternally docile. The earth's unsettled sleep is not merely a historical curiosity, it is a present reality, a constant hum of potential energy beneath the surface of our everyday lives. It is a reminder that even in our modern world, with all its technological advancements, we are still intrinsically linked to the planet's powerful systems. The rain that nourishes our crops can also trigger a devastating flood. The coastline that offers beautiful vistas can also be a zone of relentless erosion. The mountains that inspire awe can also conceal the threat of rockfalls or landslides. These vanished villages speak across the centuries. Their silent disappearance is a profound warning. Humanity, for all its ingenuity, remains ultimately at the mercy of the planet's vast, untamed power. Their fate underscores the critical importance of understanding, respecting, and adapting to the Earth's dynamic nature. You carry their story not just as a memory of human resilience, but as a deep, resonant echo of the planet itself, reminding you that its sleep, though often peaceful, is sometimes powerfully, devastatingly unsettled. This awareness, this deep understanding of the land's power, is itself a form of preservation, a way to learn from the past to shape a safer future. The initial fury of the storm may have passed, leaving behind a landscape irrevocably altered, but nature's work is far from over. What follows the violent tempest is often a patient, relentless process of reclaiming, an almost quiet erasure that transforms the very memory of human presence into an indistinguishable part of the earth itself. You stand on what was once a bustling village street, not days after the flood but years, even decades later. The immediate shock has given way to a profound stillness. Feel the shift beneath your feet. The ground, once firm and trodden by generations, is now yielding. Perhaps it is a soft, deep layer of silt, deposited by the retreating waters, now overgrown with new resilient grasses. Or perhaps it is the shifting sand, pushed inland by persistent winds and tides, slowly but surely swallowing what remains. The sea, having delivered its initial devastating blow, now returns to its quieter, ceaseless labor. Its waves, once a violent battering ram, now murmur a lullaby of dissolution, eroding the last vestiges of foundations, polishing stray shards of pottery into smooth, anonymous stones. You see the skeleton of a forgotten home. Its timber frame, once robust, now leans at an impossible angle, softened by years of rain and sun, a mere suggestion against the horizon. The roof, if it exists at all, is a patchwork of gaping holes, inviting the sky inside. Where walls once stood, there are now only gaps, filled with the wind's whisper. Vines, like diligent green surgeons, have begun to knit themselves through the cracks, securing their hold, patiently dismantling brick by brick, stone by stone. Their tendrils reach into what were once living rooms, kitchens, bedrooms, transforming domestic spaces into wild, organic chambers. Imagine the gardens, once carefully tended, now a riot of untamed flora. The delicate roses and vibrant petunias that signified human cultivation have long since vanished, replaced by hardy weeds, invasive brambles, and native plants that thrive on neglect. A gnarled apple tree, perhaps a lone survivor, stands defiant, its fruit now small and sour, inedible to human taste but a feast for birds and insects. This is nature asserting its primal claim, pushing back against the brief, fragile dominion of humanity. The very air you breathe carries the scent of this transformation. It is the saline tang of the ocean, blended with the damp earth, the decay of wood, and the robust aroma of new growth. There is no trace of wood smoke from hearths, no smell of baking bread, no lingering perfume of human life. Instead, it is the elemental perfume of the wild, a testament to its relentless return. Listen closely. The sounds are different now. The distant cry of a gull, the sigh of the wind through skeletal remains, the rhythmic ebb and flow of the tide. These are the sounds of a world without human chatter, without the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, or the laughter of children playing in the street. The village's chorus has faded, replaced by the ancient, persistent symphony of the natural world. Think of the homes. What happens when a house, once filled with light and warmth, is abandoned to the elements? The plaster peels away like sun-scorched skin. The wallpaper, perhaps a vibrant floral pattern or a subtle stripe, fades and flakes, revealing the raw lath beneath. Floors buckle, warped by moisture. Windows, once eyes to the world, are shattered or opaque with grime, reflecting only the desolate sky. Furniture, if any remains, is reduced to unrecognizable lumps of rot and rust, slowly dissolving back into the earth from which its components were drawn. A child's toy, perhaps a wooden soldier or a porcelain doll, might lie half buried in the silt, a poignant, almost heartbreaking relic of lives abruptly halted. But even these are transient. The soil itself, over time, works to digest them, pulling them down, erasing their form. Consider the streets and paths. Once clearly defined, they are now indistinct. The cobblestones may have shifted, sinking into the soft earth, or been completely covered by layers of sand and vegetation. What was once a clear route to the village well or the church is now a winding trail, often impassable, lost to the creeping wilderness. Nature does not follow human logic or infrastructure. It simply flows and grows, oblivious to our meticulously planned layouts. The very landscape itself undergoes a metamorphosis. A sandy beach might extend far inland, burying fields and foundations. A river, once confined by human engineering, might burst its banks and carve a new path, creating new wetlands where houses once stood. Forests might reclaim clearings, their roots cracking through old stone walls, their branches reaching for the sun where chimneys once smoked. This isn't just erosion, it is a full-scale ecological succession, a profound resetting of the balance. For communities living near these vanished places, the physical erasure can be accompanied by a fading of memory. The stories might persist for a generation or two, passed down by those who witnessed the catastrophe or heard it from their parents. But as the physical evidence diminishes, so too does the vividness of the recollection. The village becomes less a tangible place of sorrow and more a cautionary tale, a myth, a whisper in the wind. The precise location might even become debatable, the specific details blurred by time. You might encounter an old stone marker half submerged, its inscription illegible, a silent sentinel to a forgotten name. Or a lone, hardy bush, perhaps planted by a villager long ago, now stands as the only living monument. These are the last, most ephemeral links to the past, soon to be indistinguishable from the wild. This process of nature's patient erasing is not inherently malicious, nor is it a judgment. It is simply the way of the world. The earth operates on a scale of time utterly alien to human experience. A century, for us, is a vast span, a measure of generations. For the planet, it is barely a breath, a fleeting moment in its geological processes. The sea does not remember the names of the people whose homes it swallowed. The wind does not mourn the loss of their livelihoods. They simply continue their work, sculpting the land, shaping the coastlines, returning all things to their natural state. Yet there is a profound beauty in this relentless cycle. The land, though transformed, is not dead. It is reborn, vibrant with new life, demonstrating its incredible resilience. The very forces that brought about destruction also foster renewal. Where houses once stood, new ecosystems flourish. Birds nest in the ruins, insects burrow in the softened earth, and small mammals make their homes in the sheltered hollows. Life, in its myriad forms, persists and adapts, finding new niches in the altered landscape. This transformation serves as a potent reminder of human impermanence, a quiet, humbling lesson delivered by the very earth we inhabit. Our structures, our possessions, our carefully constructed lives, are but temporary arrangements within the vast, ongoing narrative of the planet. We build, we inhabit, we thrive, but eventually the wild reclaims its own. Consider the deeper implications. These vanished villages, now swallowed by sand, sea, or forest, become monuments to the transient nature of human endeavor. They speak not just of the power of storms, but of the ceaseless march of time and the earth's quiet persistence. Their stories teach you that even in absence, there is a powerful presence. The void they leave behind is filled not with emptiness, but with the vibrant, unceasing life of the natural world. You walk through this phantom village, feeling the rough texture of the land underfoot. Perhaps you kick at a loose stone, and it turns out to be a fragment of a chimney, or a piece of a foundation. Each step you take is across a palimpsest, a layered parchment where human history has been written, then effaced and overwritten by the script of nature. The wind, it feels, carries not just the scent of the sea, but the faint, almost imperceptible echoes of lives once lived here, absorbed into the very fabric of the landscape. The land doesn't forget in the human sense, but it reabsorbs. The elements that once comprised a village, the wood, the stone, the clay, the very dust of human activity, are gradually broken down and reintegrated into the soil, the water, the air. It is a slow, dignified decomposition, a return to the earth. This patient erasing is perhaps the most profound part of the story of the vanished villages. The initial cataclysm is dramatic, terrifying, and immediate. But it is the long, quiet aftermath, the slow turning of the seasons, the tireless work of wind and water and root, that truly completes the vanishing. It is in this steady, almost imperceptible process that the full weight of nature's power truly settles. It is a power not just of destructive force, but of enduring, transformative presence. It is the deep, patient breath of the planet itself, slowly but surely smoothing over the traces of our fleeting presence. You turn to look back at where the village once stood. There is no clear outline now, no obvious scar on the land. The horizon is a seamless blend of earth and sky, water and shore. It is as if the village never was, dissolved back into the primordial elements from which it was briefly, bravely, and tragically formed. The story of its vanishing is not just a tale of a single night's storm, but of nature's unending, patient erasing, a constant reminder of the delicate balance we strive to maintain with the world around us. But even as the physical traces fade, the stories themselves begin to take root. They twist and turn, carried on the wind like forgotten seeds, finding purchase in the minds of those who remain. You might think that with the complete disappearance of a village, its history would also be erased, leaving nothing but an empty space on a map that was never properly updated. Yet, the human spirit abhors a vacuum, especially a historical one. Where there once stood homes and hearths, lives and livelihoods, the absence itself becomes a kind of monument, not of stone but of whispers. You stand on what feels like an unremarkable patch of land, yet your imagination is stirred by the invisible echoes. You know a village once thrived here, its people living out their days, their routines etched into the very soil beneath your feet. And then, a night of unimaginable fury, a tempest that devoured all. The immediate aftermath would have been a landscape of devastation, a shock that reverberated through every surviving soul, every nearby community. And from that shock, from that gaping wound in the earth and in memory, the first stories would have been born. These were not grand historical narratives, written by scholars in distant libraries. No, these were raw, immediate accounts. The hushed tones of survivors recounting the impossible wave, the rising waters, the sudden collapse. The vivid, often exaggerated details of the night, passed from one fearful neighbor to another. You hear the tremor in their voices as they describe the darkness, the wind's shriek, the screams swallowed by the storm. These are the eyewitness testimonies, the foundational bricks of what would later become legend. As years turn into decades and decades into centuries, these immediate accounts evolve. They are retold around evening fires, shared in hushed tones during fishing trips, murmured by elders to wide-eyed children. The specifics might blur, the exact number of houses or the names of families might fade, but the core drama intensifies. The storm grows larger in the telling, the destruction more absolute, the fate of the villagers more poignant. The narrative becomes streamlined, focusing on the most dramatic elements. The unheeded warnings, the hero who tried to save others, the chilling premonition, the sheer, sudden violence of nature. You notice how these stories serve multiple purposes. They are a way to process unimaginable grief, to collectively mourn what was lost. They are cautionary tales, warnings to future generations about the unpredictable power of the sea, the river, or the sky. They are also acts of remembrance, ensuring that even if the physical location vanishes, the memory of the people who lived there does not entirely disappear. Each retelling is a small act of defiance against the ultimate erasure, a quiet assertion that these lives mattered, that their end was tragic and worthy of recall. Consider the fisherman who once lived on this coast. His descendants, perhaps generations removed, still speak of the night of the great surge, even if they no longer live close enough to hear the waves. They speak of the family homestead, lost to the deep, carrying with them not just a memory, but a sense of inherited sorrow, a connection to a place they have never seen. You feel this connection too, a faint pull across the centuries as you listen to the imagined voices, the echoes of their loss. These fables of the vanished often exist on the fringes of documented history. Official records might note the date of the disaster, perhaps even a brief mention of the lost population. But the vivid human detail, the emotional texture, the folk wisdom embedded in the narrative, these are rarely found in dry archives. They reside instead in oral tradition, in local folklore, sometimes in fragments of old songs or poems. You search for these subtle clues, these murmurs on the wind, understanding that they hold a truth that statistics alone can never convey. Imagine a child, generations ago, asking their grandmother about the ghost village. The grandmother might not speak of geological shifts or meteorological patterns. Instead, she might tell of a particularly cruel wind, of lights seen beneath the waves on certain moonless nights, of the spirits of the lost protecting the shores. These are not lies, but rather truths expressed through the language of myth and wonder, the only way to adequately explain the inexplicable and give meaning to immense sorrow. The very name Murmured Tales suggests this quiet, persistent nature. They are not shouted from the rooftops, but whispered in quiet moments, shared within families, preserved by those who feel a deep, often unconscious responsibility to remember. They are like faint echoes in a great, empty hall, barely audible but undeniably present. You lean in, metaphorically, trying to catch every word, to piece together the fragments of what once was. And what happens when even the murmurs fade? What happens when the last person who knew the story dies, or when the community disperses and the traditions are broken? Then the village vanishes for a second time. First, from the physical world, then from the world of living memory. It becomes truly lost, a forgotten chapter in the vast, sprawling book of human history. This prospect lends a particular urgency to these tales, a sense that we are trying to grasp something precious and ephemeral before it slips entirely through our fingers. You walk these forgotten paths, your presence a temporary tether to the past. You are a listener, an archivist of the unspoken, a witness to the power of stories. You understand that history is not just about dates and events, but about the enduring human experience, the triumphs and the tragedies, the joys and the sorrows. And for these vanished villages, history is overwhelmingly about the sorrow, the sudden, cataclysmic loss that leaves an indelible mark on the collective consciousness, even if that consciousness is now only a scattered collection of fading memories. These tales remind you of the fundamental fragility of human endeavor. How quickly a community built over generations with effort and love can be swept away in a single night. How dependent we are on the earth beneath our feet, the climate above our heads. They are humbling narratives, stripped of grand pronouncements, simply recounting the abrupt end of ordinary lives in extraordinary circumstances. The boring history title in this context becomes ironic. There is nothing boring about the deep human drama embedded in these stories. They are raw, powerful narratives, often reduced to a footnote in larger historical accounts, but brimming with the stuff of life and death, resilience and despair. You realize that the boring part refers to the way these events are sometimes presented, as mere statistics, devoid of the very human element that makes them so compelling. But here, standing on this imagined ground, you are immersed in that human element. You feel the weight of countless unseen footsteps, hear the spectral laughter of children, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the murmur of market day. And then the roar of the storm, the silence that follows, and the slow, quiet birth of the fables. You are not just studying history, you are experiencing it, or at least, experiencing the profound echoes it leaves behind. These are the quiet monuments to places that could not hold still. The land shifted, the water rose, the wind tore through, and all that remained were the stories, carried like dust motes on the light, settling gently into the crevices of human memory. You feel the air around you, thick with these unseen narratives, a tapestry woven from sorrow, wonder, and the stubborn human need to remember. The history of these vanished villages is not a loud proclamation, but a series of soft, persistent whispers. It is the sound of the past speaking to the present, not with a shout but with a sigh. It is the knowledge that even when everything seems lost, something always remains. The echo of a name, the fragment of a tale, the lingering sense of lives once lived where now only the wind blows. And as you listen, you become a part of this enduring narrative, keeping the murmurs alive. You carry a piece of their forgotten story forward, simply by acknowledging their silent presence. Imagine now the quiet that follows. The roar of the storm, the shriek of the wind, the deluge of the rain or the surging wrath of the water, all have faded. All that remains is an immense, heavy silence. You stand at the edge of what was once a thriving village, and the only sound you hear is the gentle sigh of the wind through newly exposed reeds, or the soft lapping of water against a shore that has moved inland, claiming new territory. There are no shouts, no cries, no hurried footsteps. The world here has gone still. It has entered an eternal slumber. The houses, the shops, the village square where children played and elders conversed, have all been utterly erased. It is as if the land itself has drawn a great, sweeping hand across its surface, wiping away every trace of human endeavor. You search with your eyes, scanning the landscape for any familiar contour, any recognizable outline. Perhaps a mound of earth where a sturdy stone wall once stood, or a subtle dip in the terrain that suggests a former road. But these are faint echoes, not clear markers. The storm did not merely damage, it consumed. It did not just destroy, it dissolved. Think of a place that was vibrant one night, alive with the everyday rhythms of human existence. Smoke curling from chimneys, the murmur of conversation carrying on the breeze, the distant bark of a dog, the clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Then the night came, bringing with it an unimaginable fury. By dawn, the light revealed not devastation but absence. A void where life had been. The storm did not just pass through, it lingered just long enough to perform a complete act of erasure. This is the essence of their eternal slumber. It is not a ruin where fragmented walls tell tales of past grandeur. It is not a ghost town where empty buildings stand as silent sentinels. This is a place where the physical memory has been almost entirely obliterated. The ground beneath your feet might be where a hearth once warmed a family, where laughter echoed, where lives unfolded over generations. Now it is just earth, perhaps softened by mud, perhaps newly scoured by water, indistinguishable from the wildland around it. The silent epitaph for these villages is written not on stone, but on the very landscape. The bending trees, if any survived, stand as mute witnesses. The altered course of a river or stream speaks volumes of the force that redefined the local geography. The new patterns of erosion, the deposition of silt, the way the light falls on an empty expanse where once there were homes, all combine to form this unspoken testament. It is a monument to what was, sculpted by the very forces that brought about its end. For the people who lived in neighboring communities, the morning after such a night brought a profound and terrifying realization. Not just the loss of homes and livelihoods, but the complete disappearance of friends, family, and an entire way of life. Imagine the dawning horror as search parties ventured into the transformed landscape, not looking for survivors among wreckage, but searching for anything that remained, and finding almost nothing. The names of these vanished villages would forever be whispered with a solemnity reserved for mass graves without markers, for stories of sudden, overwhelming tragedy. This total effacement of a place leaves a unique kind of grief. It is not the grief of seeing a cherished home reduced to rubble, which can at least be mourned and perhaps rebuilt. This is the grief of utter absence. The landscape itself seems to hold its breath, a vast, open wound of memory. You feel the weight of this silence pressing in on you, not menacing but profoundly sad. It is the silence of all the stories untold, all the songs unsung, all the futures that were suddenly, irrevocably cancelled. The land, in its slow, patient way, begins to heal the scars of the immediate destruction. New grasses sprout. Wildflowers bloom. Birds return to nest. But beneath this veneer of natural renewal, the deeper silence persists. It is the silence of human absence, a permanent quietude that settles over the area like a shroud. The memory of the village recedes from daily life, becoming a story told around fires, a cautionary tale, a legend whispered among generations. Yet, the physical space itself remains as a silent testament, a geological footnote to a human drama. You might wonder, standing here, what it means for a place to truly vanish. It is more than just abandonment or decay. It is the obliteration of its identity as a human settlement. Its spirit, its essence, has been absorbed back into the raw, indifferent power of nature. The village, as a living entity, has not merely died. It has ceased to exist in any discernible form. It has achieved an ultimate state of rest, an eternal slumber from which there is no awakening. Consider the objects that were swept away. A child's toy, a family heirloom, a farmer's tools, a baker's bread oven. All gone. Scattered, buried, dissolved, or carried far out to sea. These were the mundane anchors of everyday life, holding stories within their very fabric. Now they are lost to time and tide, silent companions to the vanished homes and lives. Their loss contributes to the overwhelming sense of emptiness, a completeness of erasure that defies easy comprehension. The local maps of generations past would have shown these villages, clearly marked, perhaps with their own unique names and symbols. Now, if you consulted a modern map, you would find only blank spaces, or perhaps a changed coastline, a new lake, or an expanded riverbed. The cartographer's pen, mirroring nature's hand, has wiped them from the official record, leaving only a ghost on older parchments, a faint memory in the collective consciousness. The land has been redrawn, and with it, history has been subtly, powerfully rewritten. The sheer scale of the natural forces that could achieve such an absolute vanishing act commands a quiet awe. A single night, a few hours, and an entire community is rendered unto dust and water. It is a stark reminder of the fragile hold humanity has on the landscapes it inhabits, of the profound power of the earth's raw elements. This quiet awe intertwines with a profound sense of melancholy, for the lives that were so abruptly ended, for the dreams that were so suddenly shattered. As you contemplate this silence, you might feel a connection not just to the vanished people but to the land itself. The land here holds the echo of their presence, even if no stone remains. It is permeated with the memory of their existence. The very air you breathe, the soil beneath your feet, the gentle sounds of the surviving elements, they all carry a subtle resonance of that sudden, profound shift. This is the silent epitaph, continuously sung by the wind, whispered by the water, and held within the unyielding earth. It is a story that repeats itself in different corners of the world in different centuries. The name of the storm changes, the precise nature of the destructive force varies, but the outcome is often the same: a village swallowed whole, leaving behind a testament of absence. Each such disappearance serves as a humbling lesson, a narrative etched not in legible script, but in the deeper grammar of geological time and human memory. The ultimate sleep of these villages is not a peaceful passing. It is a sudden, violent cessation, followed by an immense and lasting tranquility. A tranquility born not of peace, but of utter, complete stillness. The clamor of life ceased, the struggles ended, the daily grind halted. And then the long, unbroken sleep began, under the watchful, indifferent eye of the sky. This sense of a place truly sleeping, a deep and undisturbed slumber, is what gives it such a poignant power. You cannot wake it. You cannot dig up its past and reconstruct its present. It exists now only in the realm of story and imagination. Its structures are dissolved, its paths are overgrown, its boundaries are blurred. It is a dream that once was, now faded, leaving only a lingering impression on the mind's eye. The epitaph is silent because there is no one left to speak its words, no one left to carve its letters. The wind passing over the empty expanse, the murmur of the sea, the rustle of new vegetation. These are the only elegies offered. They speak of the fleeting nature of human endeavor, the enduring power of nature, and the quiet dignity of a place that, having lived, has now fully returned to the earth from which it sprang. And as you acknowledge this, you too become a part of this enduring silence, this deep and meaningful rest.